Hey ho! Collin Daniels, welcome to my video blog. Thank you for watching. I have to admit right off the bat something I don't often admit, which is that I screwed up a bit in creating this video blog series. Somehow, when I finished part 5, I thought I had finished part 6. And like I said somewhere else in the series, sometimes I'm good with numbers, sometimes I suck. So this would clearly be one of the times that I sucked. So there was no part 6 as I was going back through, and I'm like, what the heck am I going to do? It's going to be confusing on YouTube if people are like, there's part 5, there's part 7. Where the is part 6? You know, I have some younger fans. All my fans are young at heart. But I actually have some fans who are younger physically. Many of whom are far more mature than my older fans, and me, for that matter. So I try to keep it clean, just to let you know. On these video blogs, I try to keep my language, clean, family show kind of deal. And then I send them free singles of my song Motherfucker. It's got a coloring book. You can color in the pictures, So anyway, so I was thinking, what am I going to do? Because... there's no way this video series could only be 10 parts. That just wouldn't do. So I decided what I would do. In watching the... so now you know, it's 11 parts total if you haven't figured that out. What I decided to do in watching some of the previous parts and some of the parts you haven't seen yet, but I've already seen them, because this isn't really part 6. This is really part 11. And part 7 is really parts... But don't... Actually, let's leave the whole space-time thing out of... This is part 6. Just forget I said all of that. But in watching all the other parts of this series, I realized that I gave you a little bit of a story, or at least tiny mention or compliment of the various musicians that contributed to my record, Just Keep Goin'. But I really skipped over the 2 drummers that played on the record, Commisso, who played on Hey Collin, The Door and Make the Escape, and Vershbow, who played on, she didn't play on 3. Somewhere else I said 3. She played on 2, Final Friend and Burning Sand. But they both did an incredible job. Vin, I met through Scott Holcomb. They're in a band called the Bulletproof Lincolns together. It's a great band. He's one of the most amazing drummers I'd ever met. I was really glad that he agreed to play on the record. The only thing was that for those of you who don't know my prior punk rock history, my first band was, I loved it. I have nothing but joy from those days. It was a lot of fun. But it was very loud, angry, thunderous, pounding drums, and just screaming guitar, and just me snarling and squealing out what you might call vocals, but something sounding more like, 10,000 cats dying or something like that. Which a lot of people loved. We were very popular. But that was the only music that I had to give to Vin, to give him an idea of like what kind of musician I was and what he was going to be playing for. Except that didn't represent what we were going to do at all, because I was definitely moving in a very different direction with this record and my solo music. So giving him those recordings was kind of like asking him to be my guide on a vacation trip through France, but only handing him a map of Germany. It was pretty much completely useless. So, but that having been said, he's such a professional and so talented that whether I communicated it well to him or not, and my money's on not, he did precisely what I wanted him to do, and better than I could have ever dreamed. I mean, he was just, it was just solid. Just everything was in the right place. He never encroached on anything, but he had the right fill or the right hit of the snare or the cymbal where we needed to. He pretty much completely reinvented on the spot the bridge from my song The Door, because you'll hear, if you listen to the record, there's that little drum roll part after the first chorus, and that was not in there originally. And when we ran through it and recorded that, I was like, oh, there's there's no pause there where you put that, but you know what? That was brilliant, so we're keeping it. Thank you for screwing up in such a beautiful, awesome way and making my record even better. So Big thanks to Vin, Commisso, for doing that. I really appreciate that. Mickey Vershbow, who is the current drummer for 2 bands in Boston, Pluma Ray and To the Wedding, both great bands. She came down from Boston and played on Final Friend and Burning Sand. I really gave her not enough time at all to learn the songs ahead of time. She basically learned them in the studio while we were recording, or right before we recorded, and she just did great work. She's amazingly talented as well. I've done other versions of Final Friend with my previous bands, and her playing, it was just like, again, it was like I couldn't have dreamed that that would be that good. I'd still listen to the record myself, and I'm just blown away by what she did. So big props to my 2 awesome drummers, Vin Commisso and Mickey Vershbow. And not to go on about the whole New York rain thing that I mentioned in part 2. Why do people say that? You know, like, not to go on? Because I'm clearly going to go on about it. You know, it's like if somebody says, you know, I don't want to be rude, but, you know, what do you know? You know in that moment that person's going to be really rude to you. Why do we say that? I don't know. But a little side thing about the rain, this got nothing to do with rock and roll and nothing to do with the record. But there are some people, like, I've given up on the umbrella thing. I've given up. I've tried, like, I don't even know, 1,000 times with the cheap, crappy umbrella, the expensive, big umbrella that's capable of, you know, maiming a horse. And I'm just done. But there are people in New York who are, like, umbrella devotees. And they will tell you, you have to bring an umbrella when it rains. You have to. Otherwise, you'll be wet. Yeah, maybe it's difficult. Maybe you have to do some bobbing and weaving and be creative and agile and determined. But we're New Yorkers. That's what you do. You get a big umbrella and you fight, you know? And I'm like, dude, I'm so over it. I'm so done with the umbrellas. But there are these people that are like hardcore about umbrellas. And but I just don't get their argument. You know, it's like, well, otherwise you'd be wet. You'd get to where you're going and doing something very important in New York City, and you would be wet. And my response is like, yeah, so I'm fucking wet. Oh, sorry. Kids, don't ever use that word except when you're singing my songs to the record. Very sorry. And moms and dads. But, you know, my response is like, you know what? So I'm wet. I've never had a problem with it. I get somewhere, and if somebody says, hey, you're wet, I go, yeah, Albert Einstein, it's raining out. Have you seen it? And they're like, well, why didn't you bring an umbrella? And I was like, you know what? Here's why. Because I didn't want to fight the New York umbrella war today. Because yesterday I fought my subway train broke down and stayed put for an hour war. And then the day before that, I fought there were so many people rushing to get in the subway station in the first place, I got elbowed in the ribs 12 times war. And the day before that, I got stuck in everybody in New York City is somehow having the worst day of their life, so everybody I meet is rude to me and yelling at me war. And you know what? I just didn't have the New York City umbrella war in me today just because the man upstairs decided to tinkle on us, all right? Deal with it. That's all I'm saying. I respect the pro-umbrella argument, but I don't buy it. All right, so that's the end of part 6, which isn't really part 6, but it is. We resume the chronology in part 7.